Welcome to the 96th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by Scott David Beck. We did a show 95 after day two. So if you missed some of our commentary from that, we broke down Morgan Turner and it went into the Everest Leydecker gold medal match. But we will do a complete recap here and just an overview of what took place at the U20 World Championships. Japan number one with 167 points. India number two, 133. Close for third. China at 132. The United States was fourth with 118, and Russia was fifth with 107. Then it goes down from there. Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Turkey, and Hungary were way behind those four. So, excuse me, those five. So that was your top tier. Those top five were all competitive and all really had solid tournaments. And then for the United States, you had Morgan Turner bronze, Taylor Whiting fifth, Everest Leydecker gold, Carly Brooks fifth, Caley Graber bronze, Bella Williams was eliminated at 62, Riley Hanrahan eliminated at 65, Taína Fernandez bronze, Gretchen Donnelly eliminated at 72 kilograms, and then Piper Fowler was fifth at 76 kilograms. So on the whole, you had seven women in medal matches. We came back with four. And for me, Scott, I am giving Caley Graber the Team USA MVP because if it wasn't for her and her bronze medal performance and what she did, we know how good Everest Leydecker is. It's her second world gold medal, but she showed some things. She was in a tight semifinal match, lost 2-2, thought she could have won that, and then showed some real moxie in her bronze medal match. As far as just impact on the team, I'm giving it to Caley Graber.
Okay, a couple of things I say. I don't disagree. Great performance by Graber, and she could have absolutely won that match. That bronze medal, the semifinal match against Japan. That was a winnable match. She was leading in it. She wrestled well. She's tough. She's got a lot of length. She reminds me. We were talking about it. I look at her, and her. I don't know if that was her brother in the corner or not, but he looked pretty similar. He had that lean build, but she's got that lean build, but she's tall. So she kind of like reminds me of like Kylie Welker. When she was younger, she wrestled, 57 and 62 and just kept going up. She's a similar kind of look to me. I don't know if she'll fill out as much, but I ultimately would expect her probably to be a little heavier than she is now when she continues and finishes growing. But she wrestled really tough. I think, the one point I would say is the U.S. was actually, I know it sounds crazy, but the only country to get points in every weight class, if you look at the table. Even the athletes that necessarily didn't win, but they, based on scoring a point in the match or whatever. Good tournament. Graber wrestled Mongolia for bronze, and she did a really good job. She gave up a takedown in exposure early, but I think, I was confused by Mongolia. They really had a bad performance. I don't know what kind of team they sent, but they used to be a little better at some of these age group things. I'd say Japan, had some hammers, the Onishis and the Onos, and some real, and the 50 kilo Katsumi. So they had some hammers and they had some mortal human beings. I don't think they were necessarily, levels above us, but we're competitive in the matches we wrestled them for the most part. Graber was, it was a good tournament. Russia had a very good performance. China's tough. India, they're probably all 23 years old. Who knows? But we did a good job.
With Graber, she is a folk style match. She actually placed at the boys Minnesota State Championship.
Wow.
She likes the folk style.
I've done folk style ever since I was really little, and I've wrestled like boys folk style season all the way through high school, so I'm pretty comfortable in those folk style positions.
And it showed because she hit a lot of those in those matches, cradles, just some of the scrambles. You saw that. Yeah, and it was fun to see that take place because a lot of times you just see the classic get the leg lace, get the gut wrench. No, she was going for some different things, and you're right. Like McKendry's got a good one with her. This is a big pickup along with Marley Solomon. So they're getting some quality recruits in there. So nice job by Alexio Garcia to land a couple really good ones. And I think the ceiling's incredibly high for Graber. And I think in college it could be even better because we've talked about it's a folk style, freestyle type of mentality. And I think that's going to serve her well as she gets to McKendree.
I'm expecting her to be very good. Yeah, she was one of the, I don't want to say pleasant surprises because I watched her who's number one, and she's really good. She beat Emma Bacon dominantly in that match. Bacon was just come back from an injury, but I'm not taking anything away from Graber's performance in it. And yeah, Alexio he's a really good coach. He's a really good recruiter, and he's able to articulate his vision and get athletes to buy into that program. And be competitive where he's been with, Iowa. It's now we're going to have, Iowa, Iowa State, McKendree, and, North Central, sporadically, depending on how they, work in. But those teams are going to be banging it out. They're all going to have very good teams this year.
Giving the MVP to Caley Graber for Team USA, but I'm giving the Outstanding Wrestler Award, of course, to Everest Leydecker. She dominated her way through. And on last show, we compared her to an anaconda. And when she got that fall, that absolutely described what happened there because it took almost 2 minutes for her to finally get that fall. She was fending off some leg attacks. She got taken down, but you saw the IQ of Everest Leydecker. She figured things out, and she was able to get that position, get around, counter the takedown, and then just work patiently for the fall, and she got it, Scott.
Yeah, and you saw what she did where we were just watching when she got that reverse half in and she's just sinking and just slowly and methodically improving the position. It was one point where Kazuka almost got out of that, and then Everest was able to reapply the pressure and then sink lower. So great job by her. She's got game and she's very poised. And Junior World Tournaments is a very difficult tournament. Very difficult tournament. Winning 2 of these is exceptionally good. I'm really interested to see how, she does the Senior Worlds. And, I think she'll be a medal contender.
With Herb staying patient, I think that's the lesson here is that she just didn't get rattled because a lot of times in those positions you can force it and think you've got to get the fall right away. And as we were watching, we just said, stay right there because it didn't matter. Even if she doesn't get the fall, you just ride out that situation as long as you can. And it ended up being a fall quite a bit later.
Kazuka was trying to hang in there and fight it. I give her credit for not just giving up, but you could just almost look in her face and see that is nothing worse than when you just know you're dead and there's nothing you can do to get out of that, And it was either the match was going to end or Everest was going to get the fall. I'm glad she got the fall. It's a good way to finish the tournament. Just a great job by her. And she, Kazuka's tough. She was good. Everest, her weight wasn't there were good wrestlers in that weight class. And she just, dominated her way through.
Taína Fernandez fell at the U20 World Championships. Her first foray into this level. She's wrestling at 68 kilograms. I think she probably could have made 65 at the World Team Trials, but wanted the challenge bumped up. She's never backed away from a challenge. She's already a 3-time U17 World Champion. Got a medal, bronze medal at the U20 division, which I think is a great step up, and we saw that she's right there. You got to go watch the match. It may say 10-2, but she was right there. She could have just settled and just taken a 4-2 loss. Didn't. She went for a throw and then went for another throw at the end and lost 10-2. But she was right there. Actually, the Indian she lost 2-1. But you did some research on some of the competitors, and they've been successful at multiple tournaments at the Asians.
Yeah, this is what I would say. First of all, yeah, I think she looked a little small for the weight class. I'm sure if she stays at this weight, she'll grow into it and fill out a little bit. But these athletes were big. They were. And the size matters. Against Lather from India, there was a couple of situations where Taína got caught underneath, and when somebody's just weighing you down, normally in a couple of times she tried to come up with a leg when she hit some good leg attacks. And ultimately, the Indian athlete Lather was able to bring her down to the mat. And then you get caught underneath, you get extended. That takes a lot out of you. She was competitive. The match was much, much closer than the score. And she did what we talked about last show where, she went for a throw. and she gave up points, and she went for another takedown. So in her mind, she was losing the match. She's going to do whatever she can to try to win the match and not worry about, oh, I only lost 4-2. Now, that weight class, Song from China, who won, beat Lather in the first round of the U20 Asians. And then you had the girl from Kazakhstan, Tilukan, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sung, tied her 3-3 in an early round, and squeaked by, in another close match against Ukraine in the semi. So this weight class was very tough, actually. The Russian was fairly tough. Taína did a good job to get the bronze medal against her, wrestled a smart tactical match, but that Russian was good. So you had India, Russia, and Taína on the top, who were all good. And you had China, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine, who were tough on the bottom. And so, Japan was a non-event in that weight class. Got eliminated early, but I mean, it was we said we'd see where she is at the junior level and at this weight class. I think what we learned, broadly speaking, we were going to talk, juniors is not U17s. It is a difference. You have senior level world champions in this tournament, and many of them are capable of medaling. So it's not the same thing. It's a jump up in level. I'm not saying Taína can't handle that, but it is a jump up in level. And she jumped up weights. And, I'm not getting into minutiae here. I don't know the details, but she, if you do the eye test, she looked at the Indian athlete was bigger. These athletes are a little bigger. And either she'll stay at the weight and bulk up a little more and fill into it, or go to 65. I don't know what the thought process is, but, it's, going up weight classes into, and jumping up a level is tough. But she wrestled hard. We said, the top three, the three hammers, we said, I was thinking we'll get at least two golds and 3 medals. So we got 2 bronzes and 1 gold out of, Taína, Everest, and Morgan Turner. So, good performance by the hammers. They did their job. We had Graber. I don't want to say surprised, because I'm not surprised she won, a medal, but she was competing, she could have won the tournament. So yeah, that's a little bit of a surprise. Fowler lost her bronze medal match, as did Carly Brooks. But we wrestled, we had 7 wrestlers, wrestle for medals. We won, 4 of them. You and I were talking before the tournament. We were thinking like 3 or 4 medals. So it's not like I think expectations were, super high. And then you'll say, okay, now let's go back and do the assessment. Like, are we catching Japan? Have we caught them? And I'm going to go back to what we said with the U17. It seems to me at the youngest age group for the, these big world tournaments, not the U15, U17, we are catching them. And then at these higher levels, there's still some work to do. But as we keep building from the lower level, these athletes will be jumping up to the next levels. And over time, we will be there. And we are in the process of doing it. This is a process, not a quick event.
As you look at the team scores, though, you're right in the mix of things. One thing goes a different way, and you look at India 133, China 132, United States 118. So they're right there with those. Of course, Japan's way ahead with 167 pounds, but if you just do a letter grade assessment, I'm going B- to B, right in that range somewhere. What's yours?
I'm actually going to go B to B+. I thought the team did a good job, and this is a tough tournament. It really is. And people, all the teams were there. China was there. China was not at the U17 tournament, right? So we need to understand that. And, I also want to just make one thing kind of clear. Maybe I was a little too optimistic when we were talking. I think, Fowler's going to get the bronze and this person's going to win, Taína is going to win. And I'm not like, my style is not like fanboy style, right? I tend to be very kind of straight. But, I believed, and I think that, and I don't think we were far off. And I think the athletes were right there. And yeah, maybe we want to be positive and I don't want to have negative, but I really did believe those things, and, I think we came close. And this is kind of what I thought we'd do as a team. Maybe slightly better, but not really. These are hard. It's hard to win world medals. Keep in mind, I think people lose sight of this. Every athlete in their tournament is the best person, barring injuries or whatever, something, but pretty much the best person in their country in that weight class. The world is a big place. People want to win. People train hard. We don't have a monopoly on wrestling. So all these ladies want it. They're all good. They all train. Some countries are better than others. But just the idea that we're saying they're the best from their country at that weight, that's a pretty powerful statement, in my opinion.
Going forward with this, because you're right, I think there's just a great building block here. You have some things that you can take away and say, this was really good, and it is really hard to make a U20 world team going forward. And just take the totality of it. You have even the three hammers we talked about with Taína Fernandez, still four-time age-level world medalist, and three of those are gold at the U17 level, and her first foray is a bronze medal. So it's not like she just falls off the grid. That's a solid performance. That's a solid transition to the next level. Morgan Turner, solid transition, four-time age-level world medalist, and then of course Everest Leydecker has two now. So that is some high-level results right there.
For sure. And I would add, in Turner's case, Katsumi is really good. And she's maybe the next great lightweight of Japan coming up. So she's really good. Turner's only losses in these tournaments is 2 times to Katsumi. Everything else she's won, right? So I think that's something to keep in mind. And from Fernandez's perspective, I did say this before the tournament. When I looked at the bracket and did a little research, this was a tough weight class, and she hit India right away. So, who was, one of the favorites, and, has very close matches, 2 of them in a row with China. They were just toss-up kind of matches. So, it's not like she did not wrestle poorly. And I don't want that to come out. And she was right in that match with India. And if she wins that, she could go with China for sure. She's right at that level. So this is not a bad performance. It's a good performance in a very difficult weight class. And the score of the match she lost, I like that, actually, that she went for things. And the other thing I'm going to say is, okay, so now Taina's lost a match internationally. Good. Let's move on and let her live and wrestle internationally and not have this pressure or the people talking about she never lost internationally. Sometimes that just, even though you don't want to obsess about it, nobody likes losing, but you do feel the weight of that, and people do talk about it. So now we can leave her alone about that,
Yeah, well, Amit Elor went to the cadets in 20. He lost to Japan, and that Japanese wrestler hasn't done anything since. So it just,
and Amit's had a fairly good career since, including 2 senior world titles, Olympic title, 3 juniors, 3 U23s twice in a row. So she's done okay. So I don't think the loss does anything negative.
but isn't that the point that you have brought up, is that go out there, throw it out there. She's had the formula. She doesn't shy away from competition. She's not afraid of anything. She puts it on the line every single time. Rinse, repeat, get better, move forward.
And trust me, if you're her and her coach, I mean, I'm one of these people that thinks that you can find something in every match, positive and negative, pretty much. But there are things to work on that will get her better. And I'm glad she's finding, you want to find these things because that's how you fix them and get better. And she'll just get to the next level. There were things to take away, and there were good things, and there's a couple of things to work on, but that's okay.
When the United States does their analysis and we just look to how we close the gap at that U20 level, and it's a fluid thing. You don't know what the U17 team is going to be next season. You're not going to have Taína Fernandez. You're not going to have Morgan Turner there. So you're going to lose 2 hammers on the U17 level. I guess you didn't have Morgan Turner there this season, but you're going to lose some of the big hammers that have been there. It's fluid. And so how do we continue to close that gap as we go into the U20 level from Europe?
Well, I look and I see, our U15s and some of these younger wrestlers that I don't follow as much, but when I watch, they're very good. We just obliterate everybody in the Pan Ams at the age group level, I think, we have a good pipeline, and then the next people are going to step up and they'll get the names for themselves. I mean, you just don't get a Taína Fernandez or Morgan Turner, Everest Leydecker every day. You really don't. But we have very good athletes, and we have good developmental system now, and we're getting better, younger, and I'm fairly certain that the gaps will be filled, and we'll get the next crop and keep development.
And you have to credit the U.S. system for two of the foreign wrestlers. Kayla Batress developed in the U.S. system. She was in a medal match against Morgan Turner. And then, of course, Cora Coles developed in the U.S. system, and she was Montana, Pennsylvania, but a Canadian citizen. You see that, and then she does well. So you're looking at a world champion that has U.S. connections at 53 kilograms. So there's some other things that you can add into and factor in about what the U.S. system is doing, and that there's some positives right there.
That's a good point, Kyle. I didn't even think about it that way. Yeah, well, I mean, I just think, and by the way, this doesn't mean that if we have a down year, whether it's next year or 2 years from now, progress is like, you move from the lower left to the upper right, like on a chart as you get better, but it's choppy, it's not perfectly linear. So there might be some down years and we have down performances, but you just look broadly speaking, top to bottom, I think we're getting better and our pipeline's getting better and we're getting deeper. And, I think, youth wrestling and then leading towards senior wrestling and world domination is alive and well.
How about some of the non-U.S. wrestlers that stood out? Scott, I've tried to tell you Onishi is good. I don't know if you finally believe me, but she is really good. But she got gassed a little bit. You saw her get tested.
I don't want to say tested, but she gave up points, which is something that we haven't really seen much of, number one. Keep in mind, Savita from India, who she wrestled in the finals, is a age group world champ and very good. So that was not like a scrub. But Onishi did show little vulnerabilities. She got a little tired at the end of the match, which I've never seen. Yeah, and then you know what happened? She had I think she's up 8-0 and then maybe went to 9, but she lost a little bit of her mojo at the end when she gave us some points, and was worried about making mistakes. She looked a little tight. So I guess, back to my Drago analogy, because I use that against the Russian, she's human. She's not a robot, anybody can be beat. Anybody has vulnerabilities. And, sometimes it's fun when you could see little, and again, judging Onishi, would try judging from, perfection or trying to, just somebody who's really, really good at a young age, and the next one is Ono, who's at Penn State, who's a world champion. His sister won today at 57 kilos. She's got a very similar kind of body type to Onishi. She wrestled Urbanova from Azerbaijan, who's coached by Olympic champion Garov. And, Urbanova is a gamer. She's pretty tough. We've seen her beat Kolesnik, when she was, younger. Kolesnik was a very accoladed kind of senior. Urbanova has game, but Ono just wore her down, teched her ultimately, and picked her apart. But Urbanova, hit a good blast double. So, there's some Japanese that are pretty good, Onishi, and then I think the Ono one's going to be pretty good as well.
And then in that Urbanova, you saw a situation where you just saw her flexibility. She was pretty much did the splits in one of those positions, and you saw her getting some power positions where she got a 4 right at the end of the first period. But it's always fun to see how flexibility can play out in these matches.
Yeah, she's good. She's got really good head position. She's good in the hand fight, and she's got a good blast double from space. And then she does some of that crazy Gumby type stuff, very flexible.
What do you think about someone, if they have an Olympic rings tattoo and they haven't been to the Olympics? What do you think about that, Scott?
Okay, so that I believe you were referring to, since I pointed out when watching, it was Mammadova from Azerbaijan up at 59, who's very good. She's age group, I think, world champ, maybe cadet world champ, I think. She's very good. She had Olympic rings on her arm. Now, what I've heard about the Olympic ring, I don't know if that was a temporary tattoo or whatever, but I'm assuming it was a real one. I've kind of been told, unless you've made an Olympic team, you're not supposed to put those on. In fact, it could be like a kiss of death almost, like a little, hex. You make an Olympic team, you earn the right to put the rings on. That's just my opinion. But, I've never made an Olympic team, never would. But I kind of like to see, you see some of the Olympic rings. In my mind, I think it's supposed to be a clear message. I'm an Olympian in whatever sport.
It reminds me of, not really, but it's kind of like when Cam Guerin was going for her 4th title and then she won it and she showed off her four-time national champion tattoo. That's bold. She had already had three going into that, and then she showed off the four on her leg, and then she ends up
I didn't.
five, of
I
course.
didn't.
But yeah,
That's hilarious. I didn't know that. I know she's got a USA Wrestling tattoo.
yeah, and then she put four-time before she won four times. That's confidence right there. She went and
That's
delivered.
crazy. All right, that's some moxie. Cam's got moxie for sure. So I'm not stunned by that. And I guess she would have. Maybe she could have kept it and tried to win the next year and get the fourth, but then she had to add the fifth, right?
Overall, Japan's performance, they showed that they are still the team to beat. It's still chasing Japan at this point. They are levels above everyone else. What's your overall assessment of just where the pecking order is on the teams? Because as we said, the top five, they've separated themselves from the rest of the pack. What do you see about those top five and the movement right
Are you saying in this tournament,
in
from
this
this
tournament?
tournament, or yeah? Okay, I thought Japan, what set them apart to me was they wrestled some good athletes that were physical and maybe bigger than them and very physical, but they're very poised. They can they can be kind of dominated in the hand fight for moments, but then they regroup and they know how to tactically make the adjustments. They also do a very good job in the second period. So to me, Japan is just a little more technical, was deeper. China, I'd say, Russia was physical, not as technical. They had more of a physical style. India is just really big at the weight. They just look so big and long, and most of them are very similar body types. I know I'm harping on this, but I do have doubts about the true ages of all the athletes, and it has been kind of verified in the past that India is not always the age they claim to be. But and some of the athletes do look a little maybe older, but they're tough though. The Indian athletes are tough. They have good gut wrenches, but they're very long, very good with go behind. So, China to me had a couple of athletes that had gaps in their match. Like they're good and deep, very good on top. But when they came into some of these close matches, they lost close matches to Japan, or So, I just think it's a little bit of luck. A couple of things we could have taken second, third, definitely. I think second, but nobody's going to beat this Japan team. If we wrestled this tournament 10 times, they were going to come out on top 10 times, in my opinion.
Lots to look forward to with wrestling activity, especially as it relates to women. Real American Freestyle is coming up. We have Sarah Hildebrandt against Lucia Yepez. I don't know if you have any preliminary thoughts about that matchup, but I'll tell you what, that's where you put your hands together and you get excited about this showdown, Scott.
The question will be, to me, a couple of things. Number one, Yepez is a little bigger. But Sarah's probably big now. She was cutting a lot of weight, but yeah, maybe they're similar size. But the question is going to be, can Sarah get to her short offense and stop the blast doubles, and control the chaos, And you saw even in the Sarah match, and also with how healthy is she? Is she okay? Is she good? In the Rodriguez match, Christelle did well in those chaos positions a little bit. There was a couple of like flurries, But that to me is going to be the biggest thing. If Sarah can stop the shots and get to a short offense and look for go behinds, and maybe get her lace, she can definitely win the match. If Yepez can create chaos and open this thing up and get to her leg attacks, and she's pretty good on top too. It's I have no prediction. I'm really interested to see this and observe what It's going to be an interesting match. I could see a scenario where it's a slugfest, and I could see where it becomes a tactical match. We'll see what happens. I'm very curious about this.
Let's not lose momentum because we still have two senior world team spots to decide. 68 kilograms, Kennedy Blades against Bella Meir. And then we also have Kylie Welker versus Diamond Guilford at 76 kilograms. And Bella Meir is going to be fighting on Tuesday on the Contender Series on UFC with Dana White's Contender Series. So we have that to look forward to. So what a unique career path, career arc. You have Bella Meir going to fight.
I can't wait to watch her fight. I
That's
don't
gonna be
Final
awesome.
X.
And Final X.
And I do care about Final X, but I want to see Bella fight.
Yeah, all
You know,
within a 30-day time frame, you're gonna have
it's
those happen.
insane.
So she's a special
It's
athlete.
insane. And you know what we've learned with Bella on the wrestling side is you kind of sometimes got to throw the history and the accolades out. When she's game on and gets her mojo, she can go with anybody. Do I think, in theory, on paper, can she go with Kennedy Blades? No. In theory, Kennedy Blades is going to control and dominate the match. But I've learned not to, just watching Bellamere perform, I've been surprised sometimes. So, I think Kennedy's got to be a strong favorite, but I've seen her surprise people. And then on the, same thing with, Welker. I mean, Diamond Guilford is very experienced, very savvy, senior world team member. Obviously, Welker's, got the world medals, wrestling very well. I believe it was her that postponed the match for the injury. Is that correct? So I have no knowledge on any level. I've never probed, poked, asked to try to find out what it is. So I don't know what the injury is. If she's 100%, you'd have to make her a favorite, but I'm not counting Guilford. Guilford has wrestled Welker tough at times, and Guilford's a gamer. So with the right game plan, it could be a very close match.
With Bellamere, and we'll end with this. I think she likes having a mix of things happening all the time, whether it's submission wrestling or MMA or wrestling freestyle. I think if you tried to control that and say you can't do it, she would be stifled. I think she just needs to be opened up and do what she needs to do. And Joe Norton deserves credit for understanding that and her needs and what she needs to be the best she can be.
Yeah, well, you can't take the fight out of the fighter, right? And there's a genetic component to this, with the father Frank Mir, a great fighter and a badass. So, she's been around fighting, she knows fighting, and she knows combat sports. And you can't, you cannot create a lion. You can work within it and tame it a little bit, right? So she's an apex predator, right? So you got to work with her around her schedule, whatever. Try to technically, like for example, in the wrestling, get her better, work on certain things. But that's what she is. She's a fighter, and from a fighting family, and fighters fight.